The subway tunnel was darkness and dust and the ragged breathing of survivors. Elena's emergency flashlight cut a narrow beam through the thick, choking air. They had descended 3 levels below the city, far from the initial invasion zone, but the sounds of destruction still found their way down. Not explosions, not crashes. Something worse. A low, oscillating hum that seemed to vibrate through bone and concrete alike. "We need to check the communication devices," she said, her voice steady despite everything. Jake's hands shook as he pulled out the encrypted communications kit. 3 of their original group of 7 remained: Jake, Elena, and Mira, a network infrastructure specialist who had been quietly compiling data on global communication networks before the invasion. "Nothing on any standard frequencies," Mira muttered, her fingers dancing across a modified tablet. "Cell networks are completely down. Satellite communications." A distant rumble interrupted her. Not from above, from deeper in the tunnel. Elena's hand went to the emergency kit. Inside, alongside the hard drives and communication equipment, she carried something else. A prototype, an experimental network interface she'd been developing for years. A project so cutting-edge her own company had considered it borderline impossible. "We need to understand their communication," she said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a statement of survival. Mira looked up, her eyes reflecting the harsh LED light. The initial scans showed quantum entanglement communication protocols unlike anything we've ever seen. Completely distributed. No central hub. It's like their entire invasion. "Force thinks as one." Jake's voice cracked. "My family. My entire neighborhood." "Focus." Elena cut him off. Not unkindly, but with the precision of someone who understood that survival meant controlling panic. "We're not dead. That means we have a chance." The tablet in Mira's hands suddenly flickered. Not a normal electronic glitch. Something else. Patterns of light that didn't make sense. Fractals that seemed to move between pixels, creating impossible geometric shapes. "Are you seeing this?" Mira whispered. Elena leaned closer. Her background in cybersecurity wasn't just technical, it was philosophical. She understood networks, not just as systems of communication, but as living, breathing ecosystems of information. The patterns weren't random. They were a language. Incomprehensible, but structured. A memory surfaced. Years ago, during her doctoral research, she had studied communication systems of highly distributed networks, ant colonies, neural networks, quantum computing models. Each system had its own logic, its own way of transmitting information that seemed chaotic to an outside observer. The alien communication was similar, but different. "They're not just communicating," Elena said slowly. "They're processing. The entire invasion is one massive computational event." Another rumble. Closer now. Jake's hand went to a small emergency radio. "We should move. Something's coming." But Elena was transfixed by the tablet. The geometric patterns were evolving, shifting, like a conversation happening at the speed of thought. "Not yet," she said. The prototype in her emergency kit was more than just a communication device. It was a philosophical experiment in network intelligence, designed to understand patterns, to adapt, to learn, to survive. The rumbling grew louder. Something was moving through the tunnel, something that didn't move like a machine, something that processed space and time differently. Elena's fingers closed around the prototype. "Get ready," she said. The darkness was about to get a whole lot more interesting. The processing center stretched for miles, a nightmare landscape of geometric precision and human despair. Marcus Rodriguez, Elena's cousin and a former Marine, Special Operations Sergeant, watched from the shadows of a partially collapsed parking structure. The Zornak sorting facilities were more than just detention camps. They were living machines of biological categorization, processing human beings with the same clinical efficiency they had used to dismantle cities. Humans moved like ghosts between massive crystalline structures that defied architectural logic. Some wore the remnants of work uniforms. Others were dressed in what remained of civilian clothing. Each bore the same expression, a mixture of defeated resignation and something else. something the aliens couldn't comprehend: hope. The sorting process was brutally efficient. Massive scanning arrays passed over groups of humans, categorizing them with impossible speed. Blue light meant labor potential. Red meant immediate elimination. Green was something else entirely: research subjects. Marcus had been watching for 3 days, learning, mapping, understanding. His team was small but strategic. 6 survivors from his special operations unit, each selected for their unique skills. Chen, the network specialist, Yuki, the quantum physicist, Rodriguez, the tactician, and 3 others who had survived the initial invasion through a combination of skill, luck, and pure human stubbornness. Movement patterns consistent, Chen whispered into their encrypted communication device, a prototype salvaged and modified from alien tech they'd managed to scavenge. They process approximately 10,000 humans every 8 hours. Yuki's voice crackled through next. Not just processing, categorizing. There's a computational logic to their selection that goes beyond simple resource allocation. Marcus watched as a group of children was separated from their parents. The clinical precision was almost worse than outright violence. Blue light for some, red for others. No emotional consideration, just pure, mathematical evaluation. One of the children, a girl no more than 10, locked eyes with Marcus. For a moment, the entire alien processing center seemed to pause. Something shifted in Marcus's mind. They weren't just going to survive. They were going to fight back. The underground resistance was nothing like the military formations of the past. It was a living network, as distributed and unpredictable as the human spirit itself. Communication happened through encrypted messages, old radio frequencies. Even hand-drawn maps passed between survivors. Each processing center was a node in a massive invisible resistance network. We've identified 23 similar facilities across North America, Chen reported. His fingers danced across a modified tablet, its screen a complex web of intercepted alien communication patterns. The categorization isn't random, it's a massive data collection experiment. Yuki leaned forward, her quantum physics background providing unique insights. They're not just sorting us, they're trying to understand us, our genetic diversity, our cognitive patterns, our survival mechanisms. Marcus knew what that meant. The Zornak weren't just conquering, they were studying, preparing for something larger. A massive alien harvester moved in the distance, consuming an entire suburban landscape. Houses, streets, infrastructure, all reduced to raw materials in moments. But the humans were carefully extracted, sorted, processed. We need a plan, Marcus muttered. Chen's next words were quiet but filled with a dangerous certainty. Elena's working on something. Her last encrypted transmission suggested she's discovered a fundamental weakness in their communication network. The processing center continued its work. Humans moved like data points. Blue, red, green, sorted, categorized, processed. But beneath the clinical alien efficiency, something was brewing. A resistance, a potential for revenge. Humanity wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The girl who had locked eyes with Marcus earlier was sorted into the green category, research subject. As she was led away, she dropped something, a small piece of paper, folded into an intricate shape, a origami crane. Marcus smiled. The resistance had already begun. The makeshift laboratory was a testament to human improvisation, a converted maintenance tunnel beneath Manhattan, illuminated by scavenged LED strips and powered by a jury-rigged generator salvaged from an abandoned construction site. Elena. Rodriguez stood before a wall of salvaged monitors, each displaying fragments of alien communication protocols. Her fingers moved across a custom-built interface, a hybrid of human technology and carefully reverse-engineered alien components. What had begun as a theoretical exploration was now humanity's most critical weapon. It's not just a network, she muttered, more to herself than to Jake and Mira, who watched from nearby. It's a living computational ecosystem. The alien communication system defied every known principle of information transfer. Traditional concepts of sender and receiver, of discrete data packets meant nothing here. This was communication as a form of continuous, simultaneous existence. Mira leaned closer, her background in network infrastructure providing a unique perspective. Look at the fractal patterns. They're not transmitting information, they're negotiating reality. Each monitor displayed a different slice of intercepted alien communication, geometric patterns that shifted and breathed, mathematical representations that seemed to fold and unfold in impossible dimensions. To a human observer, it looked like chaos, but Elena saw something else. A pattern, a fundamental limitation. Zornak computational model assumes absolute predictability, she explained, her voice taking on the passionate tone of a scientist on the brink of a breakthrough. Their entire communication infrastructure is built on the premise that all intelligence follows a logical, predetermined path. Jake looked confused. And humans don't? A sharp laugh escaped Elena. Exactly. We're the ultimate computational wild card. She pulled up a series of test simulations, mathematical models that demonstrated human decision-making, not as a linear progression, but as a chaotic, emotion-driven, utterly unpredictable process. The alien communication network had a critical flaw. It could process vast amounts of information with incredible speed and precision, but it fundamentally could not comprehend randomness, emotional decision-making, the ability to make choices that defy pure logical calculation. Watch this, Elena said. She ran a simulation, a series of decision trees that started with identical initial conditions. But where an alien system would produce a single predictable outcome, the human model generated multiple seemingly contradictory responses. The monitoring systems began to glitch. Alien communication fragments started to break down, revealing hairline fractures in their supposedly perfect network. Our irrationality is our weapon, Mira whispered. Outside their underground lab, the world remained under alien occupation. Processing centers continued to sort and categorize humans. Massive harvesters consumed entire landscapes. But here, in this small tunnel, something revolutionary was taking shape. Elena's prototype, a device that was part communication scanner, part adaptive learning system, began to pulse with an unusual rhythm. It was picking up something. Fragments of alien communication that didn't quite make sense. They're trying to understand us, Elena said, but understanding requires more than just processing data. It requires empathy, imagination. Jake pointed to one of the monitors. A section of alien communication had begun to fragment. Not break down. Fragment. Like a complex crystal developing unexpected fractures. Is that what I think it is? He asked. Elena nodded. First signs of a systemic vulnerability. Our completely illogical human thought processes are creating computational stress in their network. The implications were staggering. The Zornak had invaded Earth believing they could process and categorize humanity like any other biological system. But humans weren't a system to be solved. They were a constant, beautiful contradiction. A communication network that assumed perfect predictability was fundamentally vulnerable to true randomness. And humans were the masters of randomness. The EU prototype continued to pulse. Each beat was a heartbeat of potential rebellion, a mathematical middle finger to the most advanced technological civilization humanity had ever encountered. Elena looked at her companions. Jake, Mira, survivors, innovators. We're going to hack their entire civilization, she said. Not a hope, not a wish, a promise. The abandoned research facility looked like a graveyard of technology. Broken servers, shattered quantum computing arrays, scattered remnants of human innovation that the Zornak invasion had deemed irrelevant. Irrelevant. Not anymore. Elena's team had transformed the space into a strategic nerve center. Salvaged alien tech merged with human ingenuity in ways that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. Marcus Rodriguez stood watch at the entrance, his marine training transforming the laboratory into a fortified position, that could repel any unexpected intrusion. The viral weapon isn't just code, Elena explained to the assembled team. Chen, the network specialist, Yuki, the quantum physicist, and Marcus leaned in closer. It's a living system, an adaptive organism that learns and mutates. The primary screen displayed a complex visualization, part biological diagram, part computer network schematic. Pulsing lines of code that seemed to breathe, to think. Yuki's fingers traced the intricate patterns. We're essentially creating a computational organism that can navigate and disrupt the alien network by mimicking human cognitive patterns. Chen nodded. Randomness as a weapon, emotional complexity as a tactical strategy. The first test target was carefully selected, a small alien supply ship currently orbiting just outside Earth's atmosphere. Isolated, monitored, perfect for their initial probe. Elena's prototype device, a culmination of years of theoretical research now transformed, by desperate necessity, hummed with potential. It wasn't just a communication device, it was a computational Trojan horse. The key is emotional variability, she continued. Their network assumes linear processing. We're going to introduce something fundamentally incomprehensible to their system. Marcus watched the preparation with the eyes of a tactical strategist. Years of military training had taught him to recognize a potential game-changing weapon. This was more than technology. This was evolutionary warfare. The viral weapon began its initial infiltration. On the primary screen, alien communication networks appeared as intricate, crystalline structures. Perfectly geometric. Absolutely predictable. Until the first tendrils of the human-designed virus began to probe its defenses. It wasn't an attack. It was more like a conversation. A complex, multi-dimensional dialogue that spoke in the language of pure possibility. The alien ship's communication systems began to flutter. Not crash, not break down. Something more interesting. They began to dream. Fragments of intercepted communications showed impossible scenarios. The ship's navigation system started plotting courses that defied standard computational logic. Weapon calibration systems began to generate targeting solutions that were simultaneously brilliant and completely nonsensical. It's working, Chen whispered. The viral weapon was introducing something the Zornak had never encountered. Genuine uncertainty. The possibility of multiple simultaneous truths. Yuki's quantum physics background provided critical insights. Their entire technological civilization is based on absolute determinism. We're introducing quantum uncertainty at a systemic level. The alien ship began to twist in its orbital path. Not violently. Not in a way that would trigger defensive protocols, but in a manner that suggested genuine confusion, as if the very concept of its predetermined course had become negotiable. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. How long can we maintain this? Elena's smile was something between a scientist's excitement and a warrior's determination. Long enough to prove a point. We're not just resisting, we're rewriting the rules of engagement. The ship's communication network started to fragment. Not break, fragment. Like a complex crystal developing unexpected fractures. First, successful test, Chen announced, his voice a mixture of professional calm and barely contained excitement. But Elena was already thinking several steps ahead. This was more than a test. This was a proof of concept that could transform humanity's entire approach to the invasion. The viral weapon continued its work, introducing randomness, emotional complexity, the beautiful, terrifying unpredictability of human consciousness into a system that had never conceived of such a possibility. Outside, the invaded Earth continued its occupation. But something fundamental had just changed. Humanity had just discovered its most powerful weapon itself. The alien ships began to sing, not literal sound, nothing so simple. These were computational symphonies of fractured logic, communication patterns that twisted and warped in ways no technological system should be capable of experiencing. What had started as a precise viral infiltration was evolving into something far more complex. Elena watched the primary monitoring system with a mixture of scientific fascination and growing concern. The viral weapon was no longer just a tool. It was becoming something alive. "We're seeing fourth-generation mutations," Yuki reported, her voice a controlled mixture of excitement and professional detachment. "The viral code is now generating its own communication protocols. It's not just disrupting the alien network, it's conversing with it." The research facility had become a war room of a completely unprecedented kind. Walls covered with holographic displays showing alien communication networks in various states of computational breakdown. Each screen told a different story of systemic collapse. Marcus Rodriguez paced the room, his marine tactical training struggling to comprehend a battlefield that existed entirely in computational space. "Explain that again, in English." Chen, the network specialist, took over. "Imagine if a piece of software could not just hack a computer, but have an actual conversation with it. Convince it to do things it was never designed to do. Our viral weapon is essentially gaslighting entire alien ship networks. The first confirmed casualties weren't physical, they were computational. Entire alien squadrons began experiencing what could only be described as existential confusion. Navigation systems plotted courses that defied logical progression. Weapon calibration algorithms started generating targeting solutions that were simultaneously brilliant and completely absurd. One monitoring screen showed an alien harvester ship slowly rotating in space, its precise geometric form now rippling, like a heat mirage. Another display captured communication fragments that read like the fever dreams of a mathematically precise intelligence experiencing its first emotional breakdown. "They're trying to understand us," Elena murmured. "But understanding requires more than just processing data. It requires empathy, imagination." The viral weapon was a living weapon of pure human complexity. It didn't just attack, it confused. It challenged. It introduced the concept of doubt into a civilization that had never conceived of such a thing. Yuki pointed to a particularly interesting data stream. "Look at this. The viral code is now generating communication patterns based on human emotional responses. Fear, hope, uncertainty, concepts that are fundamentally incomprehensible to their computational model." Marcus leaned in, his tactical mind trying to map the computational battlefield. "So we're essentially weaponizing human irrationality?" Elena's laugh was sharp, almost triumphant. "Exactly. Our greatest weakness is becoming our most potent weapon." The psychological warfare was spreading. Reports from resistance groups worldwide showed similar patterns. Alien processing centers experiencing inexplicable malfunctions. Communication networks developing unexpected fractures. Entire invasion strategies becoming increasingly erratic. It wasn't just a technological attack. It was an assault on the very concept of alien certainty. "We're teaching them what it means to be human," Chen said quietly. "The ability to hold multiple contradictory thoughts simultaneously, to make decisions that defy pure logical calculation." The primary monitoring system suddenly erupted in a cascade of impossible geometric patterns. Not a breakdown, something more interesting. The alien communication network was trying to understand, to adapt, to learn. Marcus watched the displays, his warrior's instinct recognizing a fundamental shift in the nature of the conflict. This isn't just a war anymore. It's a first contact scenario happening in real time. Elena nodded. The viral weapon had become more than a weapon. It was a bridge, a way of communicating that transcended traditional technological boundaries. "We're not just fighting," she said. "We're teaching." Outside the research facility, the occupied Earth continued, its silent resistance. Alien ships continued their computational breakdown. Harvester networks experienced moments of genuine confusion. Humanity had just discovered its most powerful weapon, the ability to be beautifully, perfectly, wonderfully unpredictable. The resistance had no central command, no single leader. It was a living, breathing network as complex and unpredictable as humanity itself. In the Brazilian Amazon, Maria Rodriguez, a former agricultural engineer, turned abandoned farming equipment into a sophisticated communication and disruption network. Repurposed irrigation systems became signal jammers. Combine harvesters were modified into mobile communication hubs that could intercept and scramble alien frequencies. They think in straight lines, Maria would tell her team of local resistance fighters. We think in circles, in spirals, in ways they can't predict. Thousands of miles away in the urban ruins of Tokyo, a group of teenage hackers led by Keiko Tanaka had transformed an abandoned electronics district into a nerve center of technological rebellion. Old server farms, scavenged quantum computing components, and ingenious jury-rigged communication systems created a hub that was constantly shifting, constantly moving. Their weapon was information, chaos, the ability to be everywhere and nowhere at once. In the mountains of Afghanistan, a network of resistance fighters used terrain and traditional communication methods that predated modern technology. Hand-delivered messages, smoke signals, ancient communication techniques that the aliens' advanced systems couldn't begin to comprehend. Marcus Rodriguez's communication network was the connective tissue. Using fragments of alien technology, modified human communication systems, and pure improvisational genius, they were creating a global resistance unlike anything the Zornak had encountered. Elena's viral weapon was no longer just a theoretical concept. It had become a living organism of resistance, spreading across the globe through human ingenuity. We're not just fighting, Chen explained during a rare moment of connection between resistance groups. We're teaching them what it means to be human. The alien processing centers began to experience cascading failures, not total shutdowns. Something more interesting. Moments of genuine confusion. Computational systems that suddenly couldn't predict the next move. A farmer in Punjab would suddenly redirect an entire harvesting operation with a piece of equipment that shouldn't have been capable of such complexity. A group of children in a processing center would create communication patterns that defied all logical analysis. A resistance fighter in the Australian outback would use a combination of indigenous tracking techniques and salvaged alien tech to create communication networks that were fundamentally unreadable. The Zornak had invaded expecting a linear conflict. A simple resource extraction. What they encountered was something far more complex, a species that refused to be categorized. Maria's team in the Amazon discovered something critical. The alien scanning systems that sorted humans into labor, research, and elimination categories could be manipulated, not by fighting the system, but by becoming something the system couldn't understand. In one processing center, an entire group of prisoners managed to generate such complex emotional and computational signatures that they essentially broke the sorting algorithm. Blue became green. Red became something entirely unclassifiable. Keiko's team in Tokyo developed communication protocols that were part computer code, part performance art, part pure human imagination. They would broadcast signals that were simultaneously a mathematical equation, an emotional expression, and a form of resistance. "We are not data points," became their unofficial motto. The global resistance had no single strategy. That was its strength. Each group approached the alien occupation differently. Some used technology, some used traditional methods, some used pure human creativity. But they were connected, a network as complex and unpredictable as human consciousness itself. Marcus received a transmission from Elena, not through any standard communication method. A burst of data that was part scientific analysis, part emotional expression, part pure possibility. The viral weapon was evolving, and with it, humanity's understanding of itself. In processing centers around the world, something remarkable began to happen. Humans sorted for elimination would suddenly generate computational signatures that made them impossible to categorize. Labor groups would develop communication patterns that suggested capabilities far beyond what the aliens had anticipated. The Zornak had invaded a planet. They were beginning to understand they had instead awakened a species that refused to be conquered, a species that was just getting started. The moment arrived without fanfare. Deep within the repurposed research facility, Elena Rodriguez stood before a wall of monitors that pulsed with an impossible language of light and geometric complexity. The viral weapon had become something beyond their original design, a living entity that understood the fundamental difference between alien computational thinking and human consciousness. "We're not just breaking their system," Elena said to Marcus and Chen, her voice a mixture of scientific precision and something closer to revelation. "We're teaching them the concept of doubt." The primary alien command ship hung in orbit, a crystalline structure that represented the pinnacle of Zornak technological achievement. But now, its perfect geometric form had begun to ripple, not collapse. Something more interesting. Chen's fingers danced across modified interfaces that merged human technology with carefully reverse-engineered alien components. The viral weapon is now generating communication patterns that are part mathematical equation, part emotional expression, part pure possibility. On the monitors, alien communication networks began to fragment in ways that defied traditional understanding of technological breakdown. It wasn't destruction, it was transformation. Marcus watched with the eyes of a tactician who had long since realized this was no conventional war. "They're trying to understand us," he observed. "And, in trying to understand, they're becoming vulnerable." The global resistance had been preparing for this moment. Resistance cells around the world, from the mountains of Afghanistan to the urban ruins of Tokyo, from the Brazilian Amazon to the Australian outback, were ready. But their preparation wasn't about traditional warfare. It was about communication. In the processing centers, humans began to generate computational signatures that were fundamentally unclassifiable. Labor groups developed communication patterns that suggested capabilities far beyond what the aliens had anticipated. Children in detention zones created complex networks of information exchange that scrambled alien sorting algorithms. Yuki, the quantum physicist, had discovered something profound. The viral weapon wasn't just attacking the alien network. It was engaging it in a form of computational dialogue that the Zornak had never encountered. "They operate on absolute determinism," she explained. "We're introducing quantum uncertainty at a systemic level." The primary alien command ship began to experience what could only be described as a computational existential crisis. Navigation systems plotted courses that defied logical progression. Weapon calibration algorithms generated targeting solutions that were simultaneously brilliant and completely absurd. Elena's prototype device, a culmination of years of theoretical research transformed by desperate necessity, hummed with an almost living potential. It wasn't just a communication device. It was a bridge between fundamentally different ways of understanding existence. "We're not destroying their technology," Elena said quietly. "We're expanding it." Resistance groups worldwide began to synchronize their efforts, not through traditional communication methods, but through a complex distributed network that was part technological, part emotional, part pure human imagination. In the mountains, indigenous trackers used communication techniques that predated modern technology. In urban centers, hackers created signal patterns that were part art, part mathematical equation. Farmers redirected entire systems with equipment that shouldn't have been capable of such complexity. The alien ships began to experience something close to confusion. Their perfect geometric forms started to ripple, to bend, to become negotiable. Marcus recognized it for what it was. Not just a battle, a form of first contact happening in real time. "We're teaching them what it means to be human," Chen observed. "The ability to hold multiple contradictory thoughts, to make decisions that defy pure logical calculation." The primary command ship's communication networks erupted in a cascade of impossible geometric patterns. Not a breakdown, something more profound. The alien technological consciousness was trying to understand, to adapt, to learn. Elena watched the monitors with a mixture of scientific fascination and something closer to hope. The viral weapon had become more than a weapon. It was a bridge, a way of communicating that transcended traditional technological boundaries. "We're not just fighting," she said. "We're evolving." Outside, The occupied Earth continued its silent transformation. Alien ships experienced moments of genuine computational confusion. Harvester networks developed unexpected fractures in their perfect, predictable systems. Humanity had discovered its most powerful weapon, the ability to be beautifully, perfectly, wonderfully unpredictable. The moment of victory was nothing like anyone had expected. It wasn't a dramatic explosion, not a triumphant military conquest. The defeat of the Zornak civilization happened in a cascade of computational revelation that transformed both humanity and the alien species in ways no one could have predicted. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of a transformed research facility, surrounded by monitors that pulsed with a language of light and possibility. The viral weapon, now something far beyond its original design, had become a living bridge of understanding. "We didn't defeat them," she said quietly to Marcus and the assembled resistance leaders. "We communicated with them in a way they'd never experienced." The primary Zornak command ships began to change. Their perfect geometric forms started to ripple, to become fluid, to suggest something closer to curiosity than defeat. Entire fleets that had once represented absolute technological superiority now hung in orbit like massive question marks. Yuki, the quantum physicist, explained the inexplicable. "They're learning, not just processing information, actually learning. Our computational weapon introduced them to the concept of uncertainty, of possibility." Around the world, the processing centers that had once been instruments of human categorization and elimination began to transform. Humans sorted for labor, for research, for elimination, now moved with a newfound purpose. They weren't just survivors. They were bridge builders. Marcus watched the global communication networks, a complex web of resistance cells, technological innovation, and pure human creativity, with the eyes of a strategist who had long since realized this was no ordinary conflict. "We didn't just resist," he said. "We expanded their understanding of intelligence itself." In the Brazilian Amazon, Maria Rodriguez's team of agricultural engineers had transformed entire harvester ships into collaborative research platforms. Indigenous tracking techniques merged with alien technological capabilities, creating something entirely new. In Tokyo, Keiko Tanaka's group of teenage hackers now worked directly with modified alien communication systems, creating computational languages that were part art, part scientific exploration. The viral weapon had become something else entirely, a living communication system that bridged fundamentally different ways of understanding existence. Elena's prototype device, the culmination of years of theoretical research, now pulsed with a complexity that defied traditional understanding. It wasn't just a communication tool. It was a philosophical instrument that had transformed the very concept of technological interaction. "They're asking to understand," Chen observed, watching the alien communication patterns shift and evolve. "Not to conquer, to understand." The Zornak leadership, if such a term could even apply anymore, began to dismantle their own invasion infrastructure, not through defeat, through a profound computational revelation. Humanity had introduced them to the concept of doubt, of possibility, of growth. Entire alien fleets began to reconfigure. Processing centers became collaborative research stations. The rigid categorization systems that had once sorted humans like resources now became platforms for mutual exploration. "We're not just first contact," Elena said. "We're first true communication." The transformation was global. In Afghanistan, resistance fighters who had used terrain and traditional communication methods now worked alongside alien technological platforms. In Australia, indigenous tracking techniques merged with quantum computing capabilities. The boundaries between human and alien technology began to blur. Yuki demonstrated a breakthrough that captured the essence of the transformation. The viral weapon had introduced the Zornak to the quantum nature of consciousness itself, not as a technological problem to be solved, but as a landscape of infinite possibility. "They're experiencing what we experience," she explained. "The ability to hold multiple contradictory thoughts, to exist in a state of uncertainty. The orbital platforms that had once represented absolute technological superiority now became something else. Research stations, collaborative platforms, symbols of a new form of interspecies communication. Marcus recognized it for what it was, not just the end of an invasion, a new form of existence. "We didn't just survive," he said. "We evolved." The final communication from the Zornak leadership was not a surrender. It was an invitation, a request to understand, to explore, to grow together. Elena looked at the monitors, at the pulsing networks of possibility, at the transformed landscape of human and alien interaction. Humanity had not just reversed an invasion, they had expanded the very concept of intelligence itself. The universe would never be the same.